Welcome into the 615 Sessions podcast here on this Friday, November 1st. Happy November to all who celebrate. I don't know why you would necessarily be celebrating November 1st. Maybe All Saints Day. Who's to say? Either way, Teresa Walker of the Associated Press is here with us. Hi, T. How are we?
I am good. And if anybody wants to come take down what little bit of Halloween decorations I put up, I'd be grateful. But it'll take me 5 minutes. I'll do that tomorrow. Let them dry
I
out.
don't decorate, but I do get the full-size candy bars so that nobody rolls my house with toilet paper. So at least I can avoid that part of things. This season feels like a tree filled with rolled toilet paper for the Tennessee Titans. They're hosting the New England Patriots on Sunday. That is something that has been described by me and probably somebody else, but mostly by me, as the toilet bowl. And this season is headed directly that way, or maybe it already has been, down 0-3 at the start of this thing, and the way that they've labored since then, it's just been ugly. Teresa, it's now, Levis looks like he's on track to start, though we will await a final determination. We just got the injury report. It says he's questionable. But it's almost become less to me about the quarterback as it has the coaching staff. They have not only not done what they set out to do this season, they have not produced a competitive product in the NFL where bad football teams win games all the time, a la the Houston Texans, New York Jets situation last night. What do you make of this season so far?
It feels like it's been a learning curve for the coaching staff, and we heard Brian Callahan on Monday say this isn't what we expected. And no, nobody expected this, because when you spend the, nearly $300 million in an offseason, and, you've got the number 7 draft pick overall, and you do what you do, to, swap out this roster. And yes, you've made a change with a head coach. You've done all these things. And you go 1-6, and worse, you hired an offensive-minded coach to juice the offense, and yet they found ways to be worse than they were last year. One time they've scored more than 17 points. They've had one fourth quarter where they scored any points, and it was just 12, and it was in that one win in Miami with the backup quarterback. So, the sequence that, kind of got me the most in this last week, they've got a chance to, get to 21 points right before the end of the half. They've got the ball coming out in the third, and 4 straight passes all to the left side of the field, nothing to the right, not even one run. And the answer we got was, well, those were plays that we liked. And it's like, I'm sorry, you don't stick with the plays that you like. You find a way to get the ball in the end zone. And, Mason Rudolph had run the ball in earlier in the game. Maybe wasn't the prettiest. It was a little bit of a lumbering kind of run, but he got there. And you've got Tony Pollard, and the fact that you didn't give him the ball once, and call me crazy, but, everything to the left, one play to the right side of the field. I'm begging of you. And I was tweeting it out. Go to the right once. Mason Rudolph is a big guy. Try a sneak. Do something. And it was seemed to be predetermined. There does seem to be a disconnect of the play calling in the game. And we were told Nick Holtz was going to drop the game plan during the week, and Brian Callahan is a first-time play caller, and he's calling the plays during the game. Somebody should be calling down, hey, why don't we try this at this point, instead of sticking to the predetermined, this is what we're going to do in those kind of situations. And that's where you get into trouble. You've got to have a better feel for the in-game situation and adapt. And that seems to be where we're seeing a disconnect at this point.
Well, in fact, we have that Nick Holtz audio and video from yesterday's press conference that Teresa Walker is referencing. Let's watch, shall we?
A couple things. We thought we had an advantage throwing the ball. We thought we could get the matchups we wanted, so that kind of went into that phase. So those were the best 4 plays we liked, as kind of coming out as we talked about it as a red zone plan. And then hindsight, obviously 2020, if we would run it, and especially probably that 3rd and 4th down, probably maybe change some personnels and things like that. I think we could always second guess that, but going into the game, we wanted those were our top 4 red zone passes down there inside the 5, and so we kind of wanted to go with what got us there, and we felt like we were throwing it pretty well at that point. So we just got hindsight's 2020. I think If we had to do it again, we'd probably do it the same, but also learn from what happened.
If we had to do it again, we'd probably do the same, is the part of that sent me, Teresa. Like, I
And they had a
understand
timeout as well.
the timeout is it's all offensive, and he wasn't even the worst one yesterday at the podium, because I saw bits and pieces of the Cole Sanderson press conference while we were on the air, and that was a train wreck. I mean, it is. They have experienced coaches on that staff, but the coordinators and the head coach are doing all of their jobs for the first time. And it is glaring that they are struggling at every turn, trying to figure out how to problem solve. It's not only not working, it's worse. And that, I think, is the thing that really, really sticks with you about this Titans season so far.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the challenge, because they sacrificed, and they talked about it. They sacrificed some things to help coverage, to protect the punter. The punter, Ryan Stonehouse said he can be better, but that's the thing. And what's bad? I mean, Khalif Raymond revenge game, but it wasn't just punt returns. It was kickoff coverage and, 72 yards here, a 90-yard touchdown there. And it's like, this should be better. And Brian Callahan has given an absolute ring of endorsement to Cole Anderson as his special teams coordinator, but we're not seeing the results on the field. And, that's some of this is roster makeup. They sacrifice some pieces at the bottom of the roster, to help on offense and defense, as opposed to special teamers. And, there's going to be some changes. We'll see if it helps on Sunday, because guess what? They've got the Patriots have got a guy who's leading the AFC in punt return yards. So it's like, that we could see some more of this. They're going to be tested until they show they can stop it. And we're 7 games for the Titans into this season, and this will be the 8th game. You should know where you're better at, and you should be making some fixes at this point. And we're also at a point where that early bye is coming to play, because that injury report is lengthy. And Brian Callahan said today that there's going to be a lot of game time decisions for this team. We'll get it. There's going to be a lot of guys elevated, off the practice squad, and some roster moves expected tomorrow. It's just, come on, guys, get it together. And so it's like, yeah, you should have a better feel as a coaching staff for what the changes you need to make. And it doesn't help that Treylon Burks is on IR. They traded away DeAndre Hopkins. But it's going from just when I think I've got to stop saying, when they can't get any worse, they find a way to do just that. And it just, at this point, I'm scratching my head. I'm ready to pull some hair out. I can't imagine what the front office is thinking. I will say this: there was a spotting of, not special teams, but there was a spotting of Rand Carthon and Chad Brinker at the Texas Vanderbilt game last week before watching, Quinn Ewers warm up. So it's like, we've got to get some answers for what this roster has, what this coaching staff has, and they've got to start putting pieces together and showing us. Think about this. We've got the 2 worst passing offenses on the field Sunday. So yeah, this could be a very inoffensive game, or maybe it's just offensive game. I'm not sure which.
It's thoroughly offensive, and not in the ways that it was supposed to be. Again, when this whole thing was put together, packaged, and sold, not just to media, but to fans as well. And it has fallen well short of expectation. Yeah, you mentioned the injury report, and I'll read that for the audience here in just a second, right after I remind them that the podcast is made possible by Zen Sports. Promo code ATOZTN gets you in on all the action. Betting just gets better with the Zen Sports app. Terms and conditions do apply. Must be 21 plus and in the state of Tennessee to bet at Zen Sports. And also, they will be having a big game sweepstakes where you could win a grand prize of 2 tickets to Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans, or $10,000 cash. Zensports.com for more information. The injury report is tough. Tajay Spears is out dealing with that hamstring. This is the 3rd straight game, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
That Tajay has missed. Also, L'Jarius Sneed, 3 straight. Andrew Rupcich is apparently heading to injured reserve, dealing with a triceps injury. You've got questionable T'Vondre Sweat, Trey Avery, Will Levis, as you mentioned, Tony Pollard, Dylan Radins, Amani Hooker, and Tyler Boyd. This is a team. That's the thing. Again, there are just varying things all year long, Teresa, that piss me off the more that I think about them. And one of them is that this team has had basically 3 straight years prior to this one where they've been one of the most injured teams in football. And the results have obviously reflected how banged up that they have been. They have not been able to make that excuse in this early going for them to start 1-6 in this first half of the NFL season, given that they have been the beneficiaries of the injury luck, especially against some of the teams that they've played. The amount of backup quarterbacks that they've already seen halfway through the season is ridiculous. And the fact that they can't do anything, we at some point, the answer starts to become, well, it's just about next season and it's just about how they put this thing back together in the draft. But that was not the conversation that we are supposed to be having, no matter if this was a rebuild in 2024 or not.
Oh, completely agree. I mean, the fact that fans are looking at the standings and, they're like, they have at the beginning of this week, it was a 2% chance of making the postseason. And, they're slotted. If the season ended today, they'd be picking number 2. So I know we shouldn't be, that was not expected to be the conversation before the end of October. So it's not a great situation, and they've got to start showing that they know their way out of this mess. And that's why Sunday is so important. They need to win. They are a favorite, 3.5 points, for God's sakes. But if Jacoby Brissett, Drake May is officially questionable, he's got to clear the concussion protocol. So it looks and feels like it's going to be Jacoby Brissett starting on Sunday. And I mean, Joe Flacco beat them. I mean, it's like we can go down the list. It's ridiculous. The one backup quarterback that they beat was Snoop Huntley in Miami. Preparing on defense for 2 different quarterbacks has become a way of life for them. And, the numbers look nice on paper. But unfortunately, the one number that matters most is points given up, and they're near the bottom in that category. So forget the fact that they're first in yards allowed, first in passing yards allowed. They can't throw it either, but they're giving up way too many points. And yes, it weighted by the blowout loss in Detroit. But they've got to show us that they can, first half looked great. Show us you can move the ball on offense in the third quarter. Show us that the defense can get some sacks, affect the quarterback, whoever it is, whether it's the starter, whether it's the backup. Do some of those things. And oh yeah, as Herm Edwards this way, you play to win the game. And that's where the Titans are. Show us you know how to put together a game plan, come out in the third quarter, fourth quarter, score points, and take the ball away. Time of possession, they've been good. Just show us that you know what you can do and fix things during the season, because the NFL, there's 10 games left. They can show us this through the stretch. Draft status does not matter. Draft capital at this point does not matter. You've made a couple of trades to get you some picks, fine. But we need to see that this coaching staff can put together a plan and adapt and be ready to make changes to win games in the second half and show us that they know what they're doing. It is that simple.
Much less do it at home. They haven't won a game at home this season. This Patriots game looks like one of the few that they may have an advantage in moving forward, given how much tougher the rest of the schedule gets. I mean, you looked at Minnesota, you looked at Washington before the season started, and you said, okay, those seem like maybe winnable games for a team that should be in flux but should be better. And now those look like 2 of the toughest games on the schedule at this point. I'm thinking about it this way, Teresa, where you look at how much more they can show us. And with Levis specifically. Now, again, we don't know whether Will Levis is going to be out there or not. You have a pretty good indication because he went through the week of practice in a much cleaner fashion than he did before the week against the Colts. Of course, he tested it out himself. He decided to try and push himself through it. It ended up, by his admission, or at least that's what he was telling us, limited him in some form or fashion. Brian Callahan in the press conference after that game disagreed. And then there's the thing about, before we talk about Levis potentially trying to acquit himself in this job, there's just been little moments all year long, Teresa, that stand out where the quarterback's messaging on stuff is different than the head coach's. I assume you were there for the press conference yesterday in the locker room with Will Levis, where he said essentially that the decision was his to make based on how his body was feeling. And Callahan was asked about that today, clarified and said, no, that's my decision to make, but Will's input is valued there because it's not my shoulder. And I understand that Levis, what Levis is trying to say there, but he's had some of those moments all year long where he says something different than his coach. And it allows the door to be opened for people to nitpick and say, well, what's not being communicated properly between these two people, arguably the two most important front-facing people for the football side of things right now.
Exactly. The head coach, who is the play caller in games, and your starting quarterback. And that's the thing. I don't blame Brian Callahan for wanting to have the last say, because guess what? Will Levis seems to have told his coach that he was just fine for the Indy game. And then after that game, well, if my arm was a little healthier, then maybe that ball wasn't picked off. And that was the key play in that game that was, ended up being decided by 3 points. So that was a game that they should have won. They're going up against a 39-year-old Joe Flacco. And by the way, I'm very curious to see how that plays out in Indianapolis, because 39 Joe Flacco, he's not Aaron Rodgers. He's not Tom Brady. He was brought in to be a backup. So, and yes, Brian Callahan and Will Levis have to be on the same page, because if this is the communication as far as an injury, then and what Will Levis told us was he's got to tell them where he's feeling. And I'll just say this, the fact that Mason Rudolph came in and talked second, my hunch is almost that Will Levis gets another week to rest up for all the talk of ramping up, because Brian Callahan told us Monday that, it looked like Tajay Spears was going to be back this week. He practiced Wednesday and it looked like he had a setback and didn't practice yesterday or today. So, oops, he's out. So I'm leaning more toward the fact that we see Mason Rudolph on Sunday rather than Will Levis, because they want to make sure they get that right. Because, but yeah, they've got to, they need to have a conversation. They need to have a heart to heart and get on the same page, because if Will Levis is not fully healthy, and if the coach, it almost feels like, can he trust Will Levis to tell him how he has to tell him how he's feeling, because he has not earned with his record or production. Certainly the last game he started 95 yards passing, that's not going to get it done in the NFL. So I don't blame Brian Callahan for saying, no, I'm making the final decision here. I'm the head coach. I'm the one who's in charge. And Will Levis needs to be honest with his coach and tell him exactly how he's feeling, because this team, you can't win games if you're not being open with each other.
95 yards does not get it done in the NFL, unless, of course, you're Jared Goff, who only needed 85 yards to put up a 52-14 margin of victory against this football team, because of 5 opportunities inside the 26-yard line for them to score 5 touchdowns, because of the Titans' special teams and turnover situation. A disaster. All right. Morale is high. Clearly, Teresa. I'll see you in the press box on Sunday. I don't know what we're going to watch. I'm certain it's not going to be good, but maybe it's just chaotic enough to be entertaining. We'll find out, I suppose, but I appreciate your time as always.